So back when I CNC'd a lot more than I do now, I found it really frustrating trying to have to keep track of all the different settings and speeds and feeds that I needed for all the different bits and tools that I had for my machine. And I know all the software like Fusion 360, Easel, and Carbide Create all have their own tool libraries to manage your settings and your tools, but I was pretty frequently switching between like Fusion 360 and Inventable's Easel, and I found it kind of tedious to have to update the tool libraries in both softwares. So I wanted to make something a little bit more separated and independent from the actual software that you were using to control the machines. Now, I wanted this to be an app that you can download on your phone, but my skills in app development are kind of lacking. I have some learning to do. So I decided to build the first version of this on an online platform called Coda. So that way you could access the dock on your phone using their mobile app or also through the web on your computer. And if you're not familiar with it, Coda is pretty much an online productivity software that you can use to build docks to suit various purposes. Think of it like Notion, but significantly better. Also, this isn't sponsored by Coda. I just really enjoy the product. So to start off, I first opened up 3 different CNC/CAM softwares that I've used in the past: Easel from Inventables, Carbide Create from Carbide 3D, and the manufacturing tab in Autodesk Fusion 360. I wanted to see which settings were most common across all 3 platforms since I wanted my dock to be as universal as possible. And the list I came up with was RPM, feed rate, step over, depth per pass, and plunge rate. I also decided to include chip load and the number of flutes on the bit, since I figured this would be a good reference for some. Now, as for the tools themselves, I started out with the type of cutter you have, its diameter, the materials it's best used for, and any notes you might have for this specific tool that you might want to keep in store for later. But on top of that, I also ended up adding a few more fields that would be good for future reference if you're looking for this cutter again, and also the option to upload a photo. Personally, I had a few bits that were just kind of sitting in the box, and I didn't know how to identify them or how to find the proper settings. So I think being able to match them up to a photo is a better place to work off of than just guessing and checking with the settings as you cut. So now that I had all the information that I wanted to keep track of and a platform to keep track of it on, it was time to jump into Coda. Now, there's a bunch of different docks in the gallery that you can start building off of, and you're even prompted to use a template when you first start making one, but I decided to start from scratch and work off an empty dock. And at its base, what I'm building is fairly simple. It's pretty much just 2 tables and a few buttons. Starting with the first table, which is the main one you're interacting with when using this dock, each column here contains a different parameter about the tool itself, with all the speeds and feeds being stored on a second table that's actually put on a second page, so it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And I went with this structure because I have the speeds and feeds being accessed on a tool by tool basis from the first table, and the second table is really just there to store data. I don't intend to actually go into it and search for a row. I also wanted the user to only be shown the settings for the specific tool that they wanted to see the settings for, because this will also avoid the issue of grabbing data from the wrong cell, like above or below the one you're actually meaning to get data from. Now, the tables that I built were pretty basic. They just store data. Like, that's what tables do. The real key to this was now linking the 2 of them so that you could access the speeds and feeds from each row in the first table. So my solution for this was to put a button in one of the columns of the table that had all the information about the tools, which ended up being far more complicated than I intended it to be. So basically, now when you add a new tool to your library, you're prompted to fill in all the information that you want. You can fill in as much or as little as you'd like. And once you're ready to add the cut settings, you can hit the button that says add on that dialog that has popped up. And when you push this button, the dock is going to automatically check to see if there is a row in the speeds and feeds table that already exists with the same tool name that you just entered. And if it does, it'll link these existing settings to this new tool that you're adding. And if it doesn't exist, a row will automatically be added to the speeds and feeds table, and the name will already be populated with what you just entered for the new bit. And from here, you can just go ahead and put in the settings. Once you've either added new cut settings or you've linked it back to an existing entry, the button will then change its label to saying open. And when you hit that, it'll just pull up the settings that you have linked to that specific tool. And the formula I used for this button was pretty much just an if statement that would check to see if that tool name already existed in the speeds and feeds table, and then link those 2 rows together. Also, shout out to Coda support team for being super helpful and responsive when I needed help figuring out how to get this to work right. But yeah, that's pretty much how I built my CNC tool library using Coda. And like I mentioned earlier, I intended this to be used with the Coda mobile app. So I went ahead and I changed the display of the main table to be in cards. So that way, when you look at it on your phone, it's a much more scrollable, friendly interface. You can see one tool at a time rather than a row that gets cut off to the right. And if you want a version of this for yourself, it's available publicly on Coda's gallery, but there's also going to be a link to it down below the like button. Also, if there's anything you'd like to see added to this, go ahead and comment that down below. This is definitely still a work in progress and I'm open to feedback. But thank you for watching. Go ahead and subscribe for more videos about tech, cameras, and making. Here's my first video CNCing with Fusion 360, and here's a video that YouTube thinks you're going to like the best.